the naming of the wards. Tim.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yes, naming of the wards. In this short cover note, I just say that we've come up with some new configurations for the wards, 2 options. I think we started with 16 options or thereabouts. We've got down to 2. Geographically, they don't reflect our past configuration of wards, and accordingly, we do need to come up with some new names that identifies that they are a different set of wards. In my cover note, I include some information from the Commission that in terms of some of the things you need to think about when we name wards, and so that's there for your information. I do recall the last workshop, or was it meeting, we did discuss the benefit of having our pre-engagement gather some information on the wards. So one option would be to come up with some placeholder names.
Chairman, I'm sorry, because I'm deaf. Can Tim have a speaker?
Oh, certainly.
Sorry,
yes. Can you get another speaker? That's right. Tim and I can share that.
Sorry.
No, you're quite right. Do you want me to start over?
No, it's okay.
I was just saying that there's some information on the cover report that from the Local Government Commission about some points you might want to think about when you're naming wards. And I was just saying that in one of our earlier meetings, we came up with the idea of getting some community engagement through a pre-engagement process in terms of what the names might be. So one option might be to come up with some placeholder names here, then go out and do some pre-engagement and get some ideas from the public. But that's all I wanted to introduce the briefing with. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I will open it up to the floor for comments and questions and so on. Deputy Mayor, over to you.
Yeah, I think rather than try and put arbitrary names on these wards, if we're going to go to the public, we should just call them 1, 2, 3 and 4 or A, B, C and D. And then the public can come forward with a suggestion. I think it'll heighten the response from the public as to the representation review itself, and it doesn't give any preconceived notion of what the names might be.
I think that's a nice, safe idea too, because actually the preconceptions there. It means that we go out with a blank slate. Mackenzie.
So to confirm, these are just names to go out to the community with, right?
These are just the interim names that we put in for the pre
Yeah, I think you go with numbers. I think, like, if you put placeholder names on it, I feel like you're going to get some people who aren't that engaged or don't really care, who just go, yep, just use the placeholder names. And you'll get people who do care and want more of a say. So I think just to be neutral, just go out with numbers, I think, personally.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Lydia.
Yeah. Mine doesn't work.
Yeah. Oh, yes, it does. Well, Lydia, I'll get Lydia to do it.
Can you keep yours?
I agree with going out with numbers as placeholders. I think what would be helpful is to, with the consultation, maybe send out the wee blurb that's in here around the descriptive names and what names should be, so that we're actually giving people some guideline around what names should be, rather than people coming up with something quite random, if that makes sense.
Can you flesh it? Can you flesh it? No, not. Can you flesh it out a bit more?
Yeah.
We don't want to. The idea about going with the numbers was that we don't want to give any preconception of what we're thinking. If we gave, wouldn't that be the same thing?
Well, not necessarily here, because when we reassess the names that come back in, they're going to be assessed against those guidelines, right? So, the use of common or predominant place or feature name, why don't we share that information with the public to allow them to make good decisions that we will then consider? Whereas if we don't provide any guideline to people, maybe names come back that we wouldn't consider.
I think that's wise, because they are the guidelines that we've got from the Electoral Commission. So that makes absolute sense. Bruce.
No, well, I'd be the same thought as what Lydia has just said, because I think if we give them some guidelines, it would certainly help the community. Because again, while I agree in the interim with Malcolm that we just call them 1, 2, 3 wards or whatever, but I think eventually we want to give some encouragement as to what we see may be fitting.
Now, just make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, Bruce. You're saying that we go out there with a suggestion of a name as well as a number, or are you saying we go, because what Lydia was saying is we go out there with a number and a guideline.
That's that's exactly what I am saying. I agree with Malcolm's concept. In the meantime, just use numbers, but give them some guides, and we may have some other, but I think it wants to be relevant to the actual district.
So is the consensus that we give out the Electoral Commission guidelines as well as the numbering? Before this one, for the end of this briefing?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Well, I guess then that fulfills the reason for the workshop, and I think you've been giving you some indication there. Sarah, I understand you've got something for us you'd like to share. So we're just getting you running around the room.
So Sarah's been doing some excellent work in terms of preparing some interactive maps. I'm not getting ahead of myself, am I, Sarah?
No. So hopefully we will have to work up the questions.
So we're running well ahead of schedule. So
Oh, okay. So we've got oh, sorry. Thank you.
right.
Great.
Have you, Sarah?
So I just wanted to report back to the group, I guess, on some of the design stuff that we've done for the representation review. So this here gives you a bit of a flavour, I guess, of what we're doing. So the people there represent, obviously, the conversation around the number of councillors within representation review, and then that is loosely the geographical area that Selwyn covers. This is just some of the digital assets that we're looking at using. So a couple of different colorways there, but you can see that they stand out quite nicely, which is great. And we've kind of gone for who represents you in Selwyn and know your options for Selwyn as the taglines for this. Now, this is where it might get a little bit tricky with the technology, but in terms of the Your Say Selwyn site, which is where we run all of our consultations through, we have created a Pick a Path adventure, which is what I kind of have called it colloquially, based off Sam's feedback in terms of the if this then that, if this then that type of scenario, similar to the Compass voting stuff that was done over the election. So we will see if this will work. Not quite. I will stop this share and then I'll pick up another share so that you can see the here we go. Cool. So this is the site as it kind of stands at the moment. There's still a bit of work to go in terms of building out what the information is that's sitting in here. We have the standard information around the representation review that is sitting in the text box. We then have options for adding in the different maps there, which I'll show you the maps in a second. We've managed to get interactive ones. And then we have a survey down here. So this is all sitting in draft at the moment. In terms of the survey, it's currently got who should represent you. You can then take the survey and there are a number of different questions sitting in there. So for example, I like the number of councillors we have. So 10 councillors elected from 4 wards. Yep, let's say I do like that. I like the current ward arrangements. Yep. Rural areas need to be grouped together to have the same number of councillors as urban areas as an option there. And then it shows, and like I said, the display is still being worked through, but with what I suggested through my answers, it says that I might slightly prefer option 2 with the same number of councillors in rural areas grouped. So there's a few typos in there. It's very much in draft form. This is only one option. There are a few different variable options that are sitting in there at the moment. So I'll just jump back and Sorry, there's just a little bit of a lag. And then I'm going to have to jump out again anyway. But in terms of the interactive maps, this here gives you a bit of a flavour of what they look like. So I can take you into, hopefully take you into a live environment. It's coming up. It's not working. It's all right. Right. Sorry, it's not quite doing what I want it to do. What I'll do instead is jump. Yeah. No, I'm good. I've got it up there now. Cool. So this is what our GIS team have pulled together for us, and this will support the activity that we have online and also in Your Say Selwyn. So you can see at the top here, this is the current ward structure as we have it as it stands. We then have option 1, as it is currently called, and option 2 as well. So this can be zoomed into, oh, that's the wrong one, zoomed in or out of to make the size change. You can also, if someone would like to throw an address at me, we can see what they might.
What's your address?
576 Dalethorpe Road.
Dale.
Oh, actually, sorry.
Publicly available.
Okay, okay.
Dale Fork.
Dalethorpe.
Thorpe. Cool. So that will zoom me into where you are. It also brings up options as well. So it shows that with the address that we've just put in there, the current ward, there's 10 councillors, and then the other 2 options there as well, and what ward that would sit in. Now, it's still got the existing names sitting in there, so that's why it's showing Melbourne Ward, Melbourne Ellesmere Ward stuff, but it brings up the specific details for the individual address that you put in, as well as what the makeup's going to be. So that's kind of it.
Okay, that's great. Any questions or comments? I've got one which I'll get to in a minute, but any questions or comments? Lydia.
Mine was just around the pick a path, and so there's the pick a path, and I think I missed it. There's pick a path, and then you can take the survey as it is, or is it only pick a path option?
It's only the pick a path. So that was a suggestion from Sam at a previous meeting, where it would be cool if you could put in some stuff that you have in terms of your own preferences, and then it would give you an option, like this option probably suits you best.
So there's no other space for people to put their.
Oh, there will be for the actual consultation responses. We just haven't built that yet.
Okay.
Yeah, so the pick a path / survey is separate and is, I guess, a little fun addition, or just something else that we're exploring to help people with their decision making around what works best for me in terms of representation. And then there will also be the standard formal consultation approach, which is which one do you like, which one, and
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Now, my question was, I'm not a surveyorist, so I'm going to ask you an incredibly dumb question. So I hope you don't mind. The questions that you've chosen they look to me to be leading questions, as in you were guiding people towards the answers you answered would have been the way that people would have been predominantly answered. Like, do you want to stick with the original, with what we've got? Yes, no, yes. People will predominantly go down the yes line. So I wonder whether, I don't know. Yeah, I guess that's my, but I'm saying that as I've acknowledged, I'm not a surveyorist. So
Cool. So we can take that feedback away, because I agree with you. This is, I've just seen this afternoon, and we're kind of still working it out and I guess massaging it into something that is valuable. So we'll take that on board in terms of the impartiality, in terms of how we frame up the questions.
I have to say that what an incredible tool that you and your team have developed, and it was what Sam was saying. And when he asked for it, I thought, yeah, we haven't got the resources that the central government has, but here we have. We've got something that's along the same line. So well done. Any more thoughts or comments?
Me.
Oh, sorry, Mackenzie.
Going off Lydia's question around there being a separate survey to the Pick a Path, potential, just a thought to take away would you change the name of the current one that you're calling survey to Pick a Path? Just because if you're going to have another survey, I feel like that's then confusing for people on here's 2 surveys, but one's telling me, like one's suggesting that I like this, but then I also want to give my feedback. So I just think it's a bit, potentially for some people, a bit confusing having them both being called surveys.
Yeah, so generally we would, within a consultation process, call it a submission. So the language will say submission. What I've shown you is a very draft kind of formulation. I just thought it'd be great to be able to report back to the group in terms of some of the things that have been requested through these meetings. So we'll definitely take that on board and make sure that it's very clear how to put through a submission.
Bruce.
Yeah, just in regards to a survey, I mean, I'm on organisations, we seem to be getting surveys all the time. You've got to make it interesting for them to actually take part. If you just do a yes-no thing, I don't think you really get the meaning of the actual survey. If you can just write 3 or 4 words to say the reason why you said yes or the way you said no, I think it proves that the survey is a bit more meaningful.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Thank you. We'll take that on board along with the other comments from the room as well around bolstering that and making it more meaningful.
I was just mentioning to Tim while we were having that conversation that the 2 maps that we have, when we go through option 1, we've called the wards 1, 2, 3, and 4 in both, but they're not the same. So they almost need to be 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D for option 1, and 2A, 2B, 2C for option 2. Does that make sense? This one here, we've got 4, 1. If we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, then option 1, ward 1 is actually represented as, and one of them is represented as this thing, and what's represented, the other one is represented as this thing. So we have to specific names, and the names then linked into the option that they are 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D. Just want to make sure that that makes sense, because we move away from numbers more into letters. I'll take the silence as being deafening and tacit
No, I think
acceptance.
it makes total sense,
Yeah.
because you've also got option 1, option 2.
Yeah, that's right.
And then letter them to make it very clear, because otherwise you don't want people to be mistaken between choosing ward 1 on one map and thinking it's ward 1 on the other map.
You've got it. That's
So
exactly it. Yep.
I agree.
Mackenzie.
Yeah, I like that. So essentially you're saying it's like map 1, here's map 1's ward A, B, C, yeah,
Yes,
and then it's
yes,
here's map 2, here's map 2's ward A, B, C.
You've got it. Yeah,
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yep, sounds good.
Now, obviously, Sarah, you've heard all that.
Could I just ask,
Yes, Bruce.
Phil, in the maps that we've currently got, I believe that we haven't, like particularly in Ward 1, it doesn't go right to Arthur's Pass, so does it? Haven't we got part of it that's not there?
I think you'll find the one below.
Yeah, that one there. Is that still straight to Arthur's Pass as well?
This one here does. This one here is the same as that one.
Yes, I
there.
appreciate that. But that one, that your bottom one there, does that include Arthur's Pass? It just doesn't seem as though it's actually big enough.
Oh, I haven't gone into the detail. Yeah.
We assume it does.
Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, we assume.
Yeah.
But to
This
me,
could-
it just
that's a
doesn't seem
good
real.
question,
It
Bruce.
just doesn't seem.
Sarah will illuminate us.
Yeah, so in terms of the GIS maps that we're using for this consultation, they definitely go up across the entire region and into Arthur's Pass. We also have some stylised maps that we've created, which also go right and show definitely right up into the Arthur's Pass region as well. We're expecting that most people, because most of this campaign is being done online, will have access to the GIS maps and can see the entirety of the district.
Okay, so as I was saying, so you've heard all of our, you heard the conversation before about the maps and everything, and I know that some media stuff has been prepared to go out with comments from Sam and myself, and we don't need to add anything more to that. And you've now got a nice rounded package.
I think so. So just so I'm clear, we've got map 1, 1, 2, 3, and then map 2, 1, 2, 3.
No, map 1. A, B, C, D, and map 2, A, B, C.
Cool.
Yep.
Great.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, if there's nothing else for the workshop, then we'll close the workshop and we'll, do you want to take a break or should we just go straight into the formal part of the meeting? Straight in, right. Got a bit of a monologue I want to do before we kick off. At the beginning of this process, we undertook to place ourselves above our positions within the ward, and sorry, above the positions we hold in Selwyn and the wards that we represent. We've had the youth councillor here is speaking for all of Selwyn, as of the councillors here speaking for all of Selwyn. So this has been our mandate across all the issues that we've considered so far, and up till now, we've considered our voting system, and we made a recommendation for STV, single transferable vote. That was overturned by council and became because of the FPP. We made a consideration around the Māori wards, and all the way through. We've had a check and balance on us of our mayor, who I touched base with earlier in the week to make sure that he's happy with the fact that we've been impartial, that we've maintained that impartiality. So as we go forward on the next two issues, the next issue really, one of them is going to be a contentious issue, and I want us to remember that we represent all of Selwyn. We're not here as the representative from our individual wards or from the community board, but we're here to talk about the concept of community boards, not the Malvern Community Board. So I'm going to be quite strict with that. If we start to diverge into the Malvern Community Board, I'm going to stop the conversation. I'm just warning you in advance, because we're not here to talk about the Malvern Community Board. We're here to talk about the concept of community boards. So on that note, I'll pass it over to, we've got to need to do some formal stuff first. So we've done the karakia. You've all got, we've got some apologies. I've got Sam, Shane, Molly and Murray. You've got those apologies already, I think. You've all,
those apologies.
Thank you. Is there a second for that? Thank you, Lydia. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Yeah, you all received copies of the previous minutes of the meeting. Would someone like to move that? Thank you, Malcolm. A seconder for that. Thank you, Mackenzie. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Okay, now we'll move into the first point on there is the naming of the wards. We have formally adopted. Can we flesh that out? Obviously, Ward 1, 2, 3, 4 is now Ward 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D. Yep. Do you follow that? Yep. And then the second part on the 310, it's going to be 2A, 2B, 2C. Would someone like to formally move that we accept that report with the recommendations? Thank you very much, Bruce. Seconder. Thanks, Mackenzie. Any conversation around that? No, no. 1A, 1A, 1B, 1C, and 1D. I guess that would have worked as well, to be honest.
Yeah, it's just going down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
This is the question. Would it be better? Some of the slings and arrows of misfortune.
And the next line. Okay, so that's up there now. That's so. Do I have someone to move that we receive the report and the recommendations? Thank you, Malcolm. Seconded. Thank you, Bruce. Any conversation on that? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Okay, the next point we have here is the name of the ward. Sorry, we've just jumped through that. We've talked about that already. Do we need to accept that report in the name of the wards?
We need to do a vote.
Okay.
Moved and seconded.
Okay. Second report there is on the naming of the wards. Oh, we've just done that.
We've just done that. Sorry.
We've just done that. Yes. So we have. Yeah. Sorry. The next thing we have here is the community boards. I'll pass over to Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this paper discusses, the purpose of this paper is to provide the subcommittee some framework for consideration of whether community boards should be included in the two options. I should remind the subcommittee that we do have to come to a position on community boards as part of the representation review. So we have to come to a recommendation of whether they should be included or not. So that's the first point I'd like to make. I'll provide some background there in terms of the statutory role of the community boards and their earlier representation review. And the last paragraph on the first page, I state that it must determine the number of community boards be constituted, their names and boundaries, the number of elected and appointed members, and so on. Importantly, the boards also need to be subdivided for electoral purposes, and I'll come to that a bit later in the report. So as we've just discussed through a series of workshops, we've come to two options which are included as an appendix to this report. In the next paragraph, I set out some facts in terms of community boards across the country. 110 community boards in New Zealand, ranging in size from those representing only a few hundred residents to more than 60,000 residents. Again, the next paragraph is quite important because if we do decide that community boards are required, then this community of interest 10 plus, 10 minus rule comes into play, and we will need to do some work in terms of whether there's proper representation across a ward. So that means we'll have to look into subdivisions of the wards. That will require some extra work. So if the outcome of today's discussion is that we are to include wards, then I've talked to Murray State about that, and we would not be able to go out for consultation under the current timeframes because we'd have to do that extra work on subdivisions. There is enough flesh in the process to meet our deadlines, but it does become a bit tight. But that's, again, if that's the view of this subcommittee, then that's an outcome that we'll just have to move around. And I guess, again, if whatever view we come to, well, for instance, if we did come to a view that we weren't going to include community boards, went out for public engagement, and there was a clear mandate from the public that community boards should be included, again, we would have to go through that process, extra bit of work in terms of looking at subdivisions. So the inclusion of community boards either at the start of the process or the end of the process will invoke an extra step in terms of getting that representation across the wards, but there is enough time in the process and the statutory deadlines to be able to meet that. So I'll just make that note. I guess my recommendation is that, well, it's not to include community boards, but My view is that we would then go out for engagement with a clear piece of engagement around asking the public whether they wanted community boards or not, and so there'll be an opportunity for the public to comment. In my view, that is a way of actually engaging the public in a more meaningful way, rather than including a community board there where people would just go along potentially with the status quo. So in my view, and others may disagree, in my view, this is able to flush out the real support for community boards or not. So back to the report, I set out the costs for the community board, and I won't go into that detail, you can read that for yourself. I then go into a discussion around the merits of community boards for both options. I do note that in option number 1 in particular, there is quite a large ward, we call it 1A, I think, and so there is an issue at first blush, you might say, that that's quite a large geographic area, and there is a case to be made that a community board would assist with the workload, and that view has some merit. But I think in terms of the environment today, where there's other options in terms of engagement, that that is not necessarily a slam dunk in terms of having a community board, but it needs to be taken into consideration. The other point I might make is, and I do speak about this in the reports, is that the research we did with First Research, I was close, did indicate that the public actually don't engage as much with the community board as they do with their councillors. So again, that's just a bit of the research that we flushed out from our pre-engagement research. So that's just something to think about as well. So anyway, look, I flush out some of the merits in terms of both options. You can read that for yourselves. But I come to the view that, in my opinion, going out for engagement with a recommendation of having no community boards and then specifically asking the public whether the community boards should be included is a way to garner a view on the public's mandate for whether they should include community boards or not. And I'll leave it up there. Happy to take questions.
Thanks, Tim. Questions for Tim on his report?
I've got several questions, but I was just waiting to perhaps for these other people. I am rather curtailed now by you saying I'm not allowed to mention anything about the Melbourne Community Board.
Well, we're not here to
because I was just going to do just a wee introduction, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes, certainly. I will allow for a few moments, for a little bit, but I don't want. This is not about
I know,
the Melbourne Community Board, and I hasten
that.
to add to that.
But it's just really, you know, it's well known that when we started this term, it was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster.
Well, I am going to stop you there,
right?
Because you're now talking exactly about the Melbourne Community Board. If you want to talk about the Melbourne Community Board, you can talk about it holistically. You can talk about it. But if Mr. Ken May, who was the first representative, was here, he would give a different account to what you would. So if you would like to give an overarching view of what the Melbourne Community Board has done over the last year, then that's
okay.
What I go forward.
That would be fine. Well, since the Community Board has been at full strength, which is only a matter of months, we have got good reaction from our people, be it within in the Melbourne ward. Mainly, we have set up now in every area either a town committee or a residents association. We have had good response. We have now allocated to every community board member currently a responsibility to those particular areas. We've had 2 informal meetings with those areas. It's been very well received, and we are looking forward. They are very supportive of what we're suggesting to them at the present time. Because currently we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 committees or town committees, and the responsibility of those is dedicated to a particular community board member. This has been exceedingly well what would I say, exceedingly well accepted. And we're getting a lot of things where, you know, items that are they mightn't mean much to the average person, but to the communities themselves, they're, we're looking at like, you know, potholes, which is a normal thing, facilities, business, youth in particular. These are things that we've talked to them about, and we've had very good response from that. The example, Springfield, was in regards to their halls, and Lake Coleridge was in regards to the trees. The Darfield, of course, was water. The Greendale was their hall. The Sheffield was the hall plus the swimming pool. Now, what a lot of them may sound perhaps of not great importance, but to the communities themselves, they are extremely important. And I guess that we particularly see that the way that the wards are going to be accepted, either Ward 1 or Ward 2, I mean, like rather option 1 or option 2, we believe that quite strongly that there is a room for a community board. But that's in, but I don't agree that we sort of go out. I'll be quite honest with Tim. I mean, I've read his report, I've discussed it with him.
Yeah.
It's just something that I don't really agree with. I believe that we should let the community decide whether they want a board or whether they don't want a board.
Okay.
I just believe quite strongly, if we agree to say, no, we're going to we don't recommend community.
It's not the Melbourne Community Board we're talking about.
Oh, no, I'm talking about community boards.
Community boards, yeah.
What I'm saying is that I've really just given you a background of what we've sort of achieved for the limited time that we've been there.
Chris, and I think your comments there have been great. I think I wrote down those comments there, and it's with some pride that I hear you say that, because starting up 8 community groups and getting the representation and the support and all those community issues that you raise individually per community is what we would expect a community board to do.
Exactly.
So now I want you to think now about across the district, and we're going to have conversations now. We're going to go over to Mackenzie.
Okay.
Sorry, just a couple of questions. Community boards, are they given funding to then like spend to actually do things, or are they just a group to advocate for their ward, to be an extra voice? Like, do they get any money to actually, you know, like make decisions and do things within their ward, or are they just a group that advocates for the people in their area?
It really depends on the level of delegations, and there would be some funding that would reflect, I guess, the delegations bestowed on them by council. Others around the table might be able to answer this better than me. I think they get some limited funding, but currently their delegations are set at a fairly low level, and so therefore the funding that would be given to the current community board isn't great.
Can I just answer the delegation one?
Now, I'll come back to you in a minute, Bruce.
Okay,
so does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So it really depends. And under if there was a view that the community boards were appropriate in terms of this representation review, I guess there might be a resetting in terms of those delegations, but the discussion hasn't happened yet.
Okay, cool.
But I just want to add a bit onto that as well. That is, again, to do with the Melbourne Community Board, not the conversation we're having today, which is about the broad concept of representation through community boards. Lydia.
Just to touch on not debating Melbourne Community Board, it's a little bit hard because that is what is in the report is the Melbourne Community Board. So it is a little bit hard to separate from that. In our consultation, if we hear from other communities saying that they want community boards, what happens then? And I want to just be clear on process. We're approving whatever the recommendation is today, that will then go to council for approval.
So we haven't got Murray here, he's the process expert, but my understanding is that we will go out for pre-engagement with the proposal. We'll go to council, sorry, then they will, no, let me think about this. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I believe we go out for pre-engagement first and then we go out,
I
the
have
recommendation comes back.
don't
Yeah,
know.
that's the way it happens. We go to for pre-engagement, we get some feedback, and then we make a recommendation to council, who then take over the formal consultation process from that point.
Okay, thank you.
So that's my understanding of the process, and that is the process.
Um,
And so just to follow up from your first part of your question,
Yeah.
we have to come to a view about community boards across the district. So we have to come to a view on the existing Melbourne area, or its reconfiguration, but also that second part of the recommendation also talks about for that other option that hasn't got a community board currently, whether there should be a community board or not.
So just to touch on that a little bit more, in reading the report, there's a few things that I sort of come to my attention from that. I would be in favour of keeping community boards. I look at what option one is with one councillor, that from that area you are cutting one councillor and 5 community board members. That is 6 people lost from that area. I think about option 2 and 3 councillors, but where would they be elected from? And would a community board maintain connection with localised representation, say if 3 people were elected from Leiston, for instance? Would a community board retain localised representation in the upper area of that ward? I note in here in the report it says that we are elected to represent the district as a whole, as per our code of conduct, which we do, and so that the Ward 1 councillor can expect assistance from other councillors. To date, I haven't seen that in my first triennium, and that people can actually be quite protective of their patch as such. You are stepping on other people's toes by entering into their wards and dealing with people. And these are just some of my views and coming from this. Our ward, the current Melbourne ward, has 14 communities of interest. Some in common, some in not. And so it is difficult to represent 14 communities of interest at this table. So I'm sorry, that's not really a question, Mr. Chair, it's more of a statement.
No, I think that's great. I think that was awesome. Malcolm.
Yeah, well, I think you know what I'm about to say. Having had a community board down in our area that had very few delegations, it acted as a buffer to democracy, with another layer of bureaucracy that was very hard to get through. And my community groups found it increasingly hard to get anything done. I do not believe that you can have a community board in one area of Selwyn and not have have several over the whole area, as was originally set up in 1989. Reading the report, the Research First gave us the figures there of the fact that people were going to their councillors. And I can assure you, Councillor Glidden, that I get calls from outside of the Springs ward from people wanting things addressed, not just within that. And I have done that consistently over the 20 odd years I've been involved around the council table. I believe that this needs to be tested to the public. And I believe the way to test that is to move the recommendation that is at the front of this paper. And I'm happy to move that resolution forthwith. And the people who want a community board will come out of the woodwork and tell us they want one and why. And I believe that is the way for this to be addressed. It's the most efficient way, is to move the representation that the subcommittee agree not to include a community board for either the 2 board options, 408 and 310. And then we will see what happens with the views of the public when they come forward. So I
Okay.
will move that.
Thank you. We have a mover. Is there a seconder for that? I will second it. As, not as the chair, but as my ward, my ward. Now,
Could I just ask
hang
you
on,
the
I'm
question,
still,
Mr. Chair?
we're still debating. We're about to open the debate.
Yeah, but I'm asking you the question, why are you seconding that? Is that on a pro forma way, or so that we can discuss
Yes,
it?
that's. I was about to.
So it's not actually not. It's not a
seconding-
true seconder. You're doing it pro forma, which allows the discussion then to
Okay,
take
Bruce, I
place.
just get hold. Alice says you got a point of order. I'm about to clarify. Yep.
Could we please adjourn for Mackenzie?
Yes, that sounds good. A good idea. We'll adjourn for 5 minutes. Okay, just to clarify what's happened, I took the adjournment there so Mackenzie, our youth delegate, could have a conversation with Tim. All of us have access to Tim all the time. In fact, Bruce has said today you've spoken to Tim. I've spoken to Tim today. I presume everyone gets access to Tim. Mackenzie did not have access to Tim, and she had some clarifications that any of us could have sought the same clarification before the meeting. I think that was probably fair in the circumstances. Before I continue on the other matter, does anyone have any concerns about that adjournment and the way that we managed it? Thank you. The second part is I've seconded the motion with my deliberative vote, which means that I have actively seconded the motion, as opposed to just as a formal thing. I've seconded it, and we can now debate the motion. So I put it out there to debate. Anyone would like to speak for the motion? We'll go for the motion first, and then we'll go against the motion first, and then we'll finish with you as closing off for as the final speaker. So all those who'd like to speak against the motion.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know my thoughts anyway, but I strongly believe that the way the motion is worded, and the way that the recommendation of Mr. Harris's report basically is saying we've made the decision, and I strongly believe that if the option goes out as a recommendation that we don't have community boards, I can't see particularly areas that haven't had community boards will realise what they're actually missing, because they've never had the experience of one. I know our Deputy Mayor mentioned the fact that they had one at Prebbleton, and it never did any good. I had quite a bit to do with that particular one, but I don't think, again, they didn't really grasp what they were really there for. It all hinges on the council as to what delegations we can get. We are entitled to some. There's no question about that. If you look at the community boards in the bigger cities, and if you look at Christchurch for itself, they have tremendous delegations because they're given the finance, etc., to do it. And if Christchurch were faced with the same thing as what we're talking about here now, because they've had the experience of community boards, I'm quite sure it wouldn't even need debating. Here, we've only had the experience of one community board, and that has been at the last LTP, or when they had the review, the council recommended no community board, none whatsoever. There was a survey done, and we did the same with Rolleston, or the Selwyn Central at that stage, but unfortunately, the man in your chair basically he didn't agree with a lot of the signatures. We couldn't have any proof that they were actual people, be it from Rolleston. That was the mistake we made. In the Melbourne survey, when they did the petition there, it was unanimous that we carry on with it. And as I say, just harking back to this year, we've got the support now of the Melbourne community. There's no question about that, because they're used to having a community board. They know what we can do.
You can just take your time, Bruce. We can pause if you like.
Sorry. No, so I think you've got to have something to actually prove it. Just by making a blank suggestion that we have no community boards, you're not giving the people a chance. And, this representation committee is formed to give our ratepayers some idea. And this comes up with wards, comes up with the naming of wards, and all that type of thing. So I would certainly very much oppose the motion that is currently before us.
I thank you for your heartfelt words, and I mean that. I'm going to ask for more conversation, but I'm going to come back to what you've just said. Is there any more conversation around that, Lydia? You're speaking against or for?
I speak against the motion. we are elected as councillors of a district to represent a district, and I guess it's pretty well known that my passion lies with our rural communities who have a more traditional way of life than our urban communities. And even looking into both options, trying to represent all of those people and all of those different thoughts from different communities of interest is particularly difficult. Rural people like more of a connection with people rather than sending an email or whatnot. I would be in favour of retaining a community board, so I'll speak against. Thank you.
I'm going to make a comment now before I pass back over to anyone else. Bruce, you made a couple of comments about representation and particularly around the city community boards. And I remind myself, I guess, more than anything else, that the city community boards represent approximately 125,000 people per board. So therefore, the 5 or 6 members of that board each represent 25,000 people approximately. These are numbers not scientific. Don't hold me to it, but I think we're going to set this a significant higher number. For argument's sake, and I said I wasn't going to talk about the Melbourne Community Board, but let's say I'm not going to. So I'm going to talk about the Rolleston area or the central area, because it's an area that is actually, in terms of both of the two proposals, though, it's not changing that much. It's 3 councillors, 3 councillors, 3 councillors. The population there, each of those councillors is representing about 10,000 people. So it's considerably lower than even the community board members in Christchurch are, and that's our councillors. So I am speaking for this motion because I think that when it comes to representation, just pure representation, if we had a board in Rolleston of, say, 5 more people, then we would actually have over-representation in that Rolleston area, because then every person, every elected member in that ward would have only 2,000 or 3,000 people that they're representing, which in an ideal world is perfect, but it's inconsistent with the modelling that we see elsewhere. So for me, it becomes a mathematical thing. I think that there is. I'm going to speak about your communities of interest. I think that is a really a good way of thinking it, and that all of our rural towns have a uniqueness. But I think if you look at any of those rural towns and again compare them to Rolleston, there is significant similarities between the rural towns against Rolleston, and that's the difference between the community of interest. That's why, for example, we don't have Darfield and Springfield in the same ward as Rolleston, because they are different communities of interest. But again, I accept that's a broad brushstroke that I'm taking over there. Now I've opened up probably a whole can of worms there, so I'm going to open the floor up again for more conversations before I come back to Malcolm. So, Bruce, you've got anything else you'd like to add?
While I agree with you, your comparison, it's a similar. I know you work very much on the people who you represent, the numbers of your people. I'm looking at the principles of it, because I do believe that they, you've got one person who might think, you've got another person who doesn't think. You're not achieving anything. But I do think in this instance, though, we're not giving our ratepayers a chance. We're not giving them a chance. And I mean, it's I just believe the way that if we send something out that is negative, I can't see the ratepayers coming back to us and saying anything different. It means it has happened, and it has happened twice. And this, and again with Melbourne, Rolleston, it was the same. They suddenly wanted a community board, and then unfortunately it wasn't taken notice of. Okay. Melbourne is exactly the same here now. It means that and I can't speak for the ratepayers of Melbourne, but certainly the people that we're dealing with now are right in behind the community board.
Mackenzie.
Okay. I've liked everyone's points. I'd just like to put that out there in this debate, and it's been a very hard decision, but I'm going to speak for the motion. I think what you said about overrepresentation is really important, and also I think we should be focusing on getting the people in our community to form positive relationships with their local councillor and feel like they can speak to them and speak freely to them to raise those issues. So yeah, I just think that going forward with the motion would be the correct way to go in this case. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Now, always looking for a conciliatory point, and I think that there is something here, and I'm not sure whether I can do it because I seconded the original motion, but there is an opportunity to add an amendment to this, and the amendment could possibly read, and I don't want to put words in either of your mouths, but could read something along the lines of and seek community input into on that decision. So we actually are saying that we're not supporting it, but that we as a committee, and I think it's probably right because we are split, that we actually we want the community to. So we're going a step further than happened last time. Last time when the representation group said we're not going to go forward, this time we're saying we're not going to go forward, but we want to hear back from the community. I'm just suggesting that's a positive amendment to the motion. If someone was to do it. Malcolm.
So what you're talking about, Mr. Chairman, is that that the subcommittee agree not to include the community board for either of the two options, 4.8 and 3.10, and ask the community for their input.
Yes.
I'm very happy to as the mover, to include that in the motion.
And I'm happy as a seconder to for that as well. Right. We now have a new. As it reads, are you able to put that up on the board there?
Probably should say on that decision.
What was that?
Probably should say for the input on that decision.
Oh yes, input on that decision.
Yeah, okay. I'm happy with that.
All right. So there is no there's no amendment. We just have a new motion that is put forward. I am going to ask people first. Normally this would be the end of the debate because we've all spoken, but I'm going to open it up again because we've added that bit in.
I have a right of reply.
Do you have to do that now because that will finish the debate?
I will.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's a bit harsh to say that we've already made the decision. We haven't. The council makes the decision. We're not the council. We make a decision as to what goes out to the public in the representation review for them to have input on. Then it comes back to us as the council table, and all the councillors around the table will be part of that decision as to what goes forward. Mr. Chair, you spoke of the number of people represented by the community boards, and it's a point I was going to bring up. And there was also conversations around delegations. If you're going to have a community board with increased delegations, then the whole of Selwyn needs to be opened up again to have community boards with increased delegations. Because Councillor Glidden talked about representing 14 communities. I represent 9. I represent 9 communities: Taitapu, Green Park, Lincoln, Broadfield, Springston South, Wachkarara, Rebelton. They're all communities. I have 2 other councillors, but I still represent those people, and I also represent a lot of people. And if we go ahead with what we're planning here, we'll also represent West Melton. Even more people with even more views and wanting even more representation. I do believe that taking this to the public is the only way forward, and the public can get up and speak about it. And that's what I propose to do, and that's why I want the motion put.
Okay, thank you. Well, obviously, thank you for that. Well, I'm going to call the vote. So, all those in favor, the motion is as it stands there. Does anyone need clarification on what we're voting for? Okay. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Okay. I declare it carried. Do you want to record your votes?
May I just say, I would have supported that had it not been that this subcommittee agreed not to include community boards. We are still giving advice, which I believe we should.
Yes, Bruce, thank you. Yes. Thank you, Bruce, and I appreciate that. And we had the opportunity to debate. Right now, do we have any other business, Tim?
I don't think so. Closing character.
Okay, so I'll.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Are you going to record my
Yes, record
that against? Thank you. I'd like my name put there.
Okay, so we're going to have we'll close the closing karakia. Una here, tapo, kia watia, ai, kua watia. Thank you, people, for your time.